The International Trade Council and its subsidiary, the International Centre for Trade Transparency and Monitoring, presents the AdamFTD project. This new project aims to use the existing data lake of the International Trade Council alongside newly developed AI tools to enable self-service for organisations involved in international trade. Let's face it, global supply chains are broken. In the last few years, supply chains have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, natural disasters, labour actions, geopolitics, and war. There are also a large number of rapid legislative changes taking place globally. These changes involve sanctions, free trade agreements, digitalisation of international trade processes, new anti-dumping regulations, and new supply chain, due diligence and traceability laws. Some of the existing legislation around supply chain transparency are reasonably simple. These laws are designed to address the issues of modern slavery, human trafficking, and trade in conflict minerals. Other laws are targeted at enhancing consumer safety, reducing the potential for corruption, and restrict the potential for sanctions violations. New supply chain laws are also coming into effect. One such legislative change in the EU involves the introduction of digital product passports. These are digital codes designed to store and present key data on traceability and environmental impacts. While EU passports are, so far, mandatory only for large corporations, they also have a direct impact on suppliers of all sizes. Every supplier to a focus company will have a mandatory obligation to identify their own suppliers, thus forcing them to comply to laws not initially meant to impact them. Some laws also place a liability on the directors and managers of non-compliant companies, and the number of laws around supply chain transparency and traceability are growing. What is the net result of all these issues? Firstly, we are already seeing a growth of imbalance of supply and demand. Pricing of certain commodities has become more volatile. Shortages are common. Shipping times are growing. And yet there is still a challenge in finding new product suppliers or buyers. We are also seeing foreign direct investment challenges as businesses pull back on making future investment decisions. This is not just caused by market inflation. Indeed, there are still companies making record profits. The challenge, instead, is quite simple. Most companies are uncertain how to take advantage of volatile markets and prefer a sit-and-wait approach. While this may be okay for some, this gives a competitive advantage to those organisations who have prepared their investment strategies and are prepared to take the market head-on. Finally, there is an increased difficulty in locating new customers and suppliers. How does one price a product in a volatile market? What does the market look like historically? What will it look like in the future? How can we be sure of who we are dealing with? What is the real benefit of entering into a new trade agreement, and what risks are there in doing so? Is supply chain diversity going to help my company or hinder its growth as we potentially double our workload in supplier management? How do we hedge certain transactions against inflation? All of these challenges are added to the burden of increased costs. Everything from compliance, trade finance, insurance, paperwork, due diligence, and more. This makes it challenging to mitigate risk. Furthermore, we estimate that 330 million exporters globally are affected by supply chain transparency laws. One of the roles of the International Trade Council is to store customs, shipping and import-export data worldwide. This data includes the imports and exports to and from 39 countries with the rest of the world. With over 14 billion data points dating as far back as 1998, this is the most comprehensive list of trade data currently known. Some of the data points for global shipments that are stored include buyer company and address, supplier company and address, logistics company, often the third-party notifier, country of origin, country imported from, which may differ from the country of origin, HS code, product description, quantity, weight in kilograms, total price, number of units, unit price, port of loading, port of delivery, shipping method, payment method, currency of payment. Depending on the country, some other fields include Incoterm used, currency conversion rate, bank account of buyer, authorized signatories, customs inspection notes, logistics notes, demurrage costs, contact name, contact email, contact phone. We can also supplement contact information using our global lookup facility, which matches public records against company details and job titles in a transparent GDPR compliant manner. Using the existing ITC data link, we can already answer the following questions for any physical product in virtually any market worldwide. What is the highest, lowest and average market price? And have those market prices changed over time? What are the volumes being purchased? In what seasons? And from what are the quantities by country of origin? Who are the suppliers of the product? What country are they from? How much do they supply? What is their pricing structure like? How do suppliers compare to one another in terms of pricing, quantities, and deliverability? What are the terms of trade for each supplier? Do the suppliers of the product generally give credit? Are the suppliers selling freight on board? Is there a big difference depending on the supplier? This information is useful for both buyers and sellers. It allows buyers to understand the best source of products and on the best terms. And it allows sellers to understand the market pricing, competition, terms of trade, and how to reach already verified buyers. The market for such data is enormous. Every single business involved in import and export needs to get the best products for the best prices. Let us look at some examples of how this data can be used. In this example, a Chinese exporter of apples wants to know the price of apples in the USA. Using the data already on hand, we can calculate the average cost paid by the US-based importer of apples, which is shown at 40 cents per kilogram. You will also see the average landed cost of apples is 49 cents per kilogram. This is the price paid to the seller of apples, plus import duties, taxes and any other requirements. If you look further down the table, you will see that even if a Chinese exporter were to offer apples for 39 cents per kilogram, that the price would not be competitive. This is because the landed cost, including taxes, is shown as 0.55 cents per kilogram. This is much higher than the price that the US importer would pay when buying apples from other countries. If you look on the right hand side of the screen, you can see the many rules and regulations required for a Chinese exporter of apples to enter the US marketplace. These are extra costs which may be enforced on either the seller of apples or the US importer. This is another feature of the current data set. A comprehensive list of up-to-date rules and regulations of virtually all products globally. These are, of course, examples only. Using the data already available, we can research any product, provided that we have the HS code or description. Furthermore, we can look at the seasonality of apple exports from the world to the USA. In this example, you will see the largest quantities and dollar value of apple exports from China to the USA are between May and August. There are also a larger number of China exporters selling to US buyers during this period. Again, the above is an example only. We could look from any country to any other country. On this page, we are simply showing an example of how we can easily drill down and manipulate certain data. In this example, we are using the data to show a history of all Apple imports into the USA from all countries. You will see that Chile is the largest supplier of apples to the USA, followed by Argentina, New Zealand, and Peru. We can provide this information instantly for any product. We can also show which air, land, and sea ports are most commonly used to ship products to the USA. Conversely, we could also look at the ports of arrival in the USA as well. This information is useful to identify risk factors per port and could be overlaid with additional data such as the maximum port capacity in container units, historical shipping delay times, historical weather patterns, labour actions, and future capacity growth plans. With this additional information, we could analyse the risk profiles of each port and make a decision as to which is the best port to ship from. Such information is also useful to government trade and investment agencies. These agencies have a need to identify the best targets for investment in their market. As an example, the system could calculate the market reach of each type of product, narrowed down by type, category, geographic location, potential dollar value, exact numbers of buyers within geographic reach, or virtually any combination of these factors. Perhaps more importantly, we can use the data to present a highly detailed buyer's analysis. The reason for this is simple. Sellers want to know who buys their product now, in what quantity, and for what price. This can give a seller a major advantage over their competitors. In this example, we are looking at the biggest buyers of apples in the United States by percentage, number of containers, weight, US dollar value, and number of suppliers. We see that, out of 449 importers, Westcott Agro Products is the largest buyer of apples in the United States. They sourced over $7.3 million of apples from 10 different suppliers in the last 12 months. Westcott Agro Products appear to source from multiple companies, so they may be open to new suppliers. Conversely, Hortifruit Import only source apples from one company abroad, meaning that they are either not interested in sourcing elsewhere or that no one has targeted them yet for potential new sales. Again, all of this is an example only. We can do this analysis instantly for any product in virtually any country worldwide. We can also perform a detailed analysis on each selected buyer or seller, including quantities over time, weights over time, dollar values over time, other products on offer. We can also look at the transitional history of a company to see whether the number or value of transactions are increasing or decreasing over time. Such transaction history is a good measure for buyers and suppliers to understand the reliability of a focus company. Company contact details can also be obtained from public access to official documents and displayed in the GDPR compliant manner, with secondary approval from the target company. We will discuss more on this subject later. On this page we see some of the import of Westcott Agri products in detail. These are just some of the fields displayed on raw bills of lading, which is the underlying data which we use to compile detailed reports. Here we see a detailed comparison of all apples imported in the USA over the last 3 years. Now let us look at some other features that we have planned. Using existing data, we envisage being able to instantly visualize the demand for a particular product, including future demand. We could then drill down and identify potential customers or suppliers and their contacts. Users could compare potential targets by different matrix, including volume, dollar value, seasons, geographic location, market entry requirements, and risk profile. Looking at existing data, users could also understand competitor pricing and terms of trade typically used. Within the software, the user could then create a competitive advantage matrix where they could prioritize targets for outreach. We could turn this data into key contact and influence matrix, thereby allowing users to access key contacts within the companies, map out those with influence over procurement decisions, and also those who block said decisions. This can all be done with GDPR compliant manner using public data sources and opt-in from companies. Finally, users would be able to reach out to focused targets directly and close deals within the platform itself. Let's look at some of these services in more detail. Imagine if, as a seller, you could get a snapshot of the global market for your specific product. You could see the number of buyers in the market versus the number of suppliers. You could see unfulfilled demand. Which markets paid the highest prices? Which markets were the easiest to enter? Users could quickly look at each market to determine if they were shrinking, consolidating, or growing, and understand the risk factors associated with each market and focus group or individual company. Users would also be able to calculate the landed cost to the exporter or to the importer of a product. Users could also be alerted to any rules or regulations that their product must adhere to in order to be sold into the marketplace. Finally, users would also be able to directly understand why certain markets were more beneficial to enter compared to others. Now let's look at how the new system would help the 330 million companies impacted by supply chain transparency laws globally. Supply chain transparency laws require companies to map every step of their supply chain. In this example, the retailer must have details of their suppliers at every stage. They should know details of the wholesaler, who sews the goods, who processed the goods, who knitted the goods, who spun the yarn, and where the raw materials came from. Imagine having to perform such analysis for every single product in that you sell. Current systems take a scattered approach to this activity. One method is to require their suppliers to perform self-audits. Such audits are dubious in quality at best, and get worse as they progress down the chain to the goods' raw origins. A second method is to conduct physical audits. This is costly, time-consuming, and expensive. This directly impacts the bottom line. A third method combines self and or physical audits with media monitoring. In this scenario, the platform monitors media outlets for human rights or environmental abuses against known suppliers. This is an imperfect system. If we look at the individual supply chain, it is a spider web of complex relationships. How would you know that your supplier isn't also selling to sanctioned organizations? Will a self-audit tell you this? Would an in-person audit reveal this information? How would you know that your supplier is also dealing in unrelated purchases of goods which have a child labour element in them? This information may never be revealed in a simple audit. Media monitoring and audits go part of the way only, but the complete picture can only be seen when you analyse every step of the supply chain. We also imagine using a new system to eliminate data anomalies. These include HS code mismatch. For example, a company may always sell apples, but a shipment may have been miscoded under a different product code, thereby altering their statistical information. Buyer-seller history mismatch. For example, a company may always buy fruit, but suddenly imports a product under an unrelated HS code group. This could be through human error or to avoid taxes or regulations. Country of origin mismatch may also be caused by human error or regulatory avoidance and is something can be automatically identified and adjusted in reports. We can also identify links to rogue or sanctioned buyers and sellers in a supply chain, no matter how complex. The system will also be designed to undertake detailed risk comparisons between focus companies. Users will be able to visualize detailed risks across a matrix of selected organizations. From there, they will be able to see the risks associated with doing business with an individual company, including the company payment history, terms of trade, credit history, and negative media. The system will also be able to forecast future demand by target group or individual company. It will be able to analyze the geopolitical and human rights risk of doing business with focused buyers or suppliers, and it will be able to identify and visualize the nexus of related companies, check legal compliance, and look for other anomalies. This information is useful for buyers, sellers, banks, trade finance organizations, and insurance companies. Another planned feature relates to mismatch of logistics data. Occasionally, goods will exit a country with the details shown of one supplier, country of origin or HS code, only to reappear in the destination country with completely different information. This is often done to avoid sanctions, anti-dumping fines, import duties or other regulations. In some instances, goods can be transferred at sea, meaning that they never arrive at their destination and are on-sold to a different buyer than that stated on the exit documentation. While we could identify these anomalies now, it is difficult to do so as each country's data is stored in separate silos. Having a combined system would mean these types of anomalies could be quickly identified and resolved. Using a combination of public registers, user opt-ins, and smart AI tools to directly link to, but not store, source data, we will be able to provide GDPR-compliant contacts within buyer or seller companies. A smart analytics overlay could allow users to track individuals within focus organizations who are responsible for procurement, sales, testing, trade compliance, finance, and other key activities. We could also use the data further to map out who are influencers, detractors, and neutral parties within an organization, so that the appropriate contacts could be reached and pitches tailored accordingly. Finally, the new platform could be used for detailed forecast modeling, with results visualized, available for download, or accessible via API. Some of the things we could forecast using the system includes the impact on trade of various geopolitical, weather, natural disasters, labour actions, port efficiency, laws and regulations from a macro to a micro level. We could also forecast pricing, demand, market growth or consolidation and risks. By using the current data lake of the International Trade Council and combining it with additional overlay data, we could look at the past, model scenarios now, and predict the future with an accuracy never before seen. Users interfacing with the system will be an additional source of data, complementing the existing data sets, refining data flows, and enhancing the accuracy of a database over time. The International Trade Council has already taken the necessary steps to form a subsidiary called the Centre for Trade Transparency and Monitoring. Sitting on the board of the new organisation is Viscount Lord Waverley of the UK House of Lords and His Excellency, and Sven Jurgensen, the former President of UNICEF and former Ambassador of Estonia to the United Nations. We are in the process of completing board allocations at the moment, with a vision to having 5 initial external board members in place by the end of December 2022. There are hundreds of different types of use cases for the new system. Everyone from simple exporters through to commodity traders and governments have a requirement to better understand trade flows. We hope that this presentation has been useful for you. If you would like to be involved, please reach out to us.